What do you do when your life-saving technology is blind to a ghost? Deep beneath the busiest street in the city, an aging steel artery is groaning under 1,000 pounds of pressure. The humans above are insulated by noise-cancelling headphones and digital distractions, walking directly over a subterranean bomb. But Copper, a 16-week-old golden retriever, doesn't need a sensor to smell disaster. He can feel the frequency of failing metal in his teeth. Meet the puppy the world tried to push aside, who became the only manual override for a city on the brink of an explosion. The Echo in the Drain, the puppy who stopped a city. Chapter 1, The Invisible River. The intersection of 5th and Main was more than just a crossing, it was the jugular vein of the city. Every morning, like a rhythmic pulse, 10,000 commuters surged across the asphalt, their movement synchronized by the cold, digital flicker of crosswalk signs. To the people above, the street was solid, a permanent stage for their daily lives. They never stopped to consider what lay beneath the soles of their shoes. Beneath the wet pavement was a chaotic, subterranean world, a labyrinth of Victorian-era brickwork and modern steel that hummed with terrifying energy. It was an invisible river of utility lines, fiber-optic cables, and high-pressure steam pipes. The city was a living machine, held together by aging rivets and a fragile balance of pressure. It was a miracle of engineering that worked perfectly until the moment it didn't. Among these veins was a 40-inch high-pressure gas main, a steel artery that carried the fuel for half the city's heat. It had been buried 60 years ago, and time had not been kind. Decades of vibrations from heavy buses and shifting soil had created a microscopic flaw in its structure. It was a ticking clock, buried in the dark, waiting for the precise moment of fatigue to finally give way. The people walking above were insulated by their technology. They wore noise-cancelling headphones to drown out the city's roar and stared at glowing screens that showed them a world thousands of miles away. They were physically present, but mentally, they were miles from the intersection. They had traded their biological awareness for digital convenience, trusting the city's infrastructure to be as reliable as their apps. In this environment, a distraction is a sin. To stop moving is to become an obstacle, a target for a frustrated sigh or a shove from a stranger. The crowd moved with a terrifying momentum, a tide of humanity that allowed no room for deviation. They were walking over a catastrophe in waiting, but because the sensors in the city's smart grid hadn't flickered yet, they believed they were safe. But that smart grid had a flaw. The gas was leaking into an abandoned storm drain, a pocket of dead air where the city sensors didn't reach. The vapor was building up, trapped beneath the street, looking for the smallest spark to turn the intersection into a crater. It was a ghost in the system, invisible to the cameras, odorless to the humans, and silent to the microphones. The intersection was a trap. The red light changed to green, and the mass of humanity stepped forward as one, a collective movement toward a center point that was about to disappear. They were victims of their own trust in the solid ground. They were moving toward a disaster, and there wasn't a single human in the city who was paying enough attention to see it. Except for one. At the edge of the curb, a 4-month-old golden retriever puppy named Copper stopped dead in his tracks. He wasn't looking at the cars or the crowd. He was looking at the ground, his ears pitched forward toward an iron grate that everyone else was stepping over. The machine of the city was about to meet its only manual override. Chapter 2, The Frequency of Fear. Copper was only 16 weeks old, his world still vibrant and raw. Unlike the humans around him, he hadn't learned to filter out the background noise of the city. To a puppy, everything is information, the smell of the rain, the vibration of the subway, the magnetic pull of the earth. His senses were his survival kit, and right now, every sensor he possessed was screaming. As he reached the edge of the storm drain, Copper didn't just hear the rushing water from the morning's rain, he felt a vibration in his teeth. It was a high-frequency pinging sound, the sound of a steel bolt vibrating in its housing as it reached the breaking point. To a human, it was the sound of a city. To a dog, it was the sound of something about to snap. But it was the smell that truly terrified him. The gas leaking into the drain had been treated with an odorant, but in the damp, heavy air of the storm, the humans couldn't catch it. Copper's nose, 10,000 times more sensitive, caught the thick, sulphurous stench of the gas mixing with the cold rain. It smelled like a predator, something hidden, heavy, and ready to strike. Copper dropped his center of gravity, his small paws digging into the wet concrete. His owner, a young man named Leo, felt the sudden tension on the leash. "Copper, come on," Leo said, checking his watch. He was already 5 minutes late for a meeting that would decide his career. To Leo, Copper's refusal to move was just puppy behavior, a stubborn streak at the worst possible time. The puppy looked up at Leo, his amber eyes wide with a frantic, primal intelligence. He whined, a long, mournful sound that was lost in the roar of a passing bus. He wasn't being stubborn, he was being a witness. He could feel the ground beneath his paws humming with a rhythmic ticking that was speeding up. The gas main was no longer leaking, it was groaning. Every time Leo tried to pull him forward, Copper fought back. He wasn't just staying still, he was actively pushing Leo away from the grate. He used his weight, small as it was, to act as a barrier. He was a 4-month-old dog trying to fight the momentum of a man and the momentum of a city. He was the only creature in a 3-block radius who knew the air was toxic. The crowd began to flow around them like water around a stone. A businessman in a tailored suit nearly tripped over Copper, barking a curse as he adjusted his briefcase. "Control your dog," someone else yelled. They saw a nuisance, a delay, a flaw in their morning routine. They didn't see the guardian who was currently holding his ground against the abyss. Copper began to dig. He scratched at the wet concrete, his claws making a frantic, screeching sound against the stone. He was trying to get through the street, to reach the monster he felt underneath. He was a creature of instinct in a world of logic, and he knew that if the pack didn't stop moving, the pack was going to die. Chapter 3: The Wall of Indifference. Leo felt the eyes of the crowd on him, a heavy weight of public embarrassment. In a city like this, making a scene is the ultimate social crime. He tugged harder on the leash, his face flushing a deep red. "Copper, quit it! You're making people mad." He tried to scoop the puppy up, but Copper went limp, the dead weight trick that every dog owner knows, making him nearly impossible to lift. The indifference of the city was a physical wall. People didn't stop to ask why a dog was panicking, they only calculated how to get around the obstruction. They were so conditioned to ignore the unusual, the homeless, the street performers, the sirens, that a puppy howling at a drain was just another layer of urban static. They were walking into a furnace with their eyes wide open. A woman with a stroller gave Leo a look of pure disgust as she maneuvered around him, her wheels clicking over the very grate Copper was guarding. Copper lunged toward the stroller, not to bite, but to block. He put himself between the baby and the drain, let out a sharp, authoritative bark that he shouldn't have been old enough to possess. The woman scurried away, calling him vicious. Leo was at his breaking point. He was ready to give up, to leave the puppy and walk to work, but the look in Copper's eyes stopped him. It wasn't the look of a naughty dog, it was the look of a creature in mourning. Copper was staring at the ground as if he were watching a fuse burn down. He had stopped fighting Leo and had started guarding him, leaning his small body against Leo's shins. Beneath them, the ticking had stopped. It had been replaced by a low, hollow whistle, the sound of gas escaping at 1,000 pounds per square inch. The air around the grate was now so saturated with fuel that it was shimmering, a heat haze in the middle of a cold rain. But the humans were too busy looking at their watches to see the air ripple. The intersection was now at peak capacity. A delivery truck had stopped nearby, its engine idling and vibrating the ground. Each vibration was a hammer blow to the weakened pipe below. Copper's fur stood up like wire. He knew that the next big vibration, the next bus or the next heavy truck, would be the final spark. Leo looked at the storm drain, finally following Copper's gaze. He didn't see the gas, but he saw the puppy's ears twitching in perfect time with a sound he couldn't hear. He saw the way Copper was shivering, not from the cold, but from the intensity of his focus. For the first time that morning, Leo stopped thinking about his meeting and started thinking about his dog. "What is it, boy?" Leo whispered. He knelt down on the wet pavement, ignoring the people pushing past him. He put his hand on the iron grate, and his eyes went wide. The metal wasn't cold from the rain, it was vibrating with a rhythmic, mechanical violence that made his fingers go numb. The puppy hadn't been stubborn. The puppy had been the only one listening. Chapter 4: The Breaking Point. The realization hit Leo like a physical blow. He remembered a news report from the week before about micro fissures in the city's aging infrastructure. He leaned his ear closer to the grate, and through the roar of the traffic, he heard it, the high-pitched, terrifying whistle of escaping gas. The background noise of the city had finally been identified for what it really was, the sound of a bomb. Leo stood up, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at the hundreds of people still pouring across the street, their feet landing directly on the weakened asphalt. "Stop," he yelled, but his voice was swallowed by the wind. He was just a guy with a dog in a city of millions. No one was listening. The wall of indifference was too thick to pierce with a single voice. But Copper knew how to be heard. He didn't just howl, he began to screech, a sound that was so sharp and painful that it forced people to pull out their earbuds. It was a sound that triggered a primal response in the human brain, the sound of a predator in the camp. People finally stopped. They looked at the puppy, then at the frantic man kneeling by the drain. A construction worker named Mike, who had spent 20 years laying the very pipes that ran beneath this street, was walking to his site. He heard the puppy screech and saw the way Leo was pointing at the grate. Mike didn't need a sensor. He had felt that vibration before, years ago, right before a main had blown in the Bronx. He ran toward them, his heavy boots thundering. Mike knelt down, his hand touching the grate. His face went the color of ash. "Gas," he roared, a voice developed over decades of shouting over jackhammers. "It's a major breach. Everyone back. Get off the block now." The word gas acted like a lightning strike. The machine of the city finally broke. The crowd didn't just walk, they scattered. The panic was immediate but effective. People who had been annoyed seconds ago were now running for their lives. The intersection, which had been a solid mass of humanity, cleared in less than 60 seconds. Cars were abandoned, their engines left running, as drivers realized the ground they were sitting on was no longer safe. Copper didn't run. He stayed by Leo's side, his eyes still fixed on the grate. He had done his job. He had stopped the tide. He stood like a small, golden statue amidst the chaos of the evacuation, the only calm creature in a neighborhood of panic. He had seen the monster, he had fought the machine, and he had won. But the danger wasn't over. The idling delivery truck was still there, its exhaust spitting tiny sparks into the rain. The air around the drain was now a cloud of invisible tinder. Mike grabbed Leo and Copper by the collars, dragging them back toward the safety of a brick building. "It's going to go," Mike yelled. "Cover your heads." Chapter 5: The Manual Override. The explosion wasn't a fireball like in the movies. It was a subsurface breach, a muffled, terrifying thump that felt like the earth had been hit by a giant hammer. The asphalt at the center of the intersection buckled upward, the heavy iron grate Copper had been guarding being launched 20 feet into the air like a discarded coin. A pillar of gray vapor and debris shot out of the hole, but because the crowd had been pushed back, the lethal pressure wave hit empty space instead of human bodies. If Copper hadn't stopped Leo, and if Leo hadn't stopped the crowd, the casualty list would have been hundreds of names long. The intersection would have been a mass grave. The smell of gas was now overwhelming, a thick, nauseating cloud that hung over the ruins of the street. Fire crews, already on high alert from Mike's emergency call, arrived within 3 minutes. They deployed high-expansion foam into the breach, neutralizing the spark risk before the gas could find a second ignition source. The city had been saved from its own neglect. As the sirens wailed and the red lights flickered against the rain-slick buildings, the survivors stood in small groups, shivering and silent. They looked at the crater in the street, then they looked at the small, soaked golden retriever sitting on the sidewalk. They realized that the smart city hadn't saved them. Their noise-canceling headphones hadn't saved them. A 4-month-old puppy had. Leo sat on the curb, his arm wrapped tightly around Copper. He didn't care about his meeting. He didn't care about the rain. He looked at his dog and felt a profound sense of humility. He had been ready to drag this creature into a disaster because he was late. He had prioritized a clock over a heartbeat, and the heartbeat had been the only thing that mattered. The businessman who had cursed at Copper earlier walked over. He didn't say anything. He just reached out a shaking hand and patted the puppy's wet head. It was a silent apology, a recognition from one member of the pack to another. One by one, others followed, a quiet procession of people who realized they owed their lives to a dog who refused to move. The construction worker, Mike, walked over to Leo, wiping the soot from his forehead. "You got a good one there, kid," Mike said, gesturing to Copper. "I've seen sensors fail, and I've seen computers crash, but I've never seen a dog pull a move like that." He didn't just smell it, he felt it coming. He's got the sixth sense for the steel. Copper just wagged his tail, a slow, tired movement. The monster in the drain was gone, silenced by the fire crews and the foam. The weight was off his shoulders. He leaned his head against Leo's knee and closed his eyes. He had stopped a city of 10,000 people, and now, he just wanted to go home and sleep in the dry warmth of the den. Chapter 6, The Savior of the Street. The Fifth and Main breach became a turning point for the city's safety protocols. The investigation revealed that Copper had detected the leak nearly 20 minutes before the official sensors triggered a warning state. The puppy's biological array had outperformed $500 million of urban technology. The wall of indifference had been breached by the most humble of heroes. Copper was awarded a heroism ribbon by the fire department, but his true reward was the change in his neighborhood. He was no longer a nuisance or a problem dog. When he walked down the street, people took out their earbuds. They looked at the grates. They watched the ground. They had learned to pay attention to the silent warnings that the world is always giving us. Leo became an advocate for urban intuition, teaching people that the more we automate our world, the more we need to rely on the creatures who still live in the real one. He and Copper became a common sight at safety conferences, a man and his dog who proved that the best early warning system on Earth doesn't need a battery, it needs a soul. The crater at 5th and Main was filled, and the pipes were replaced with reinforced titanium. But if you look closely at the new asphalt, you'll see a small set of puppy paw prints stamped into the corner of the curb. It was a secret tribute from Mike and the construction crew, a permanent reminder of the day the machine stopped and the heart took over. Copper grew into a large, confident golden retriever, but he never lost his focus. He still stops at every storm drain, his ears pitching forward for a split second, just to make sure the monsters are still asleep. He is the unofficial guardian of the block, a silent sentinel who reminds everyone who sees him that safety is not a digital guarantee, it's a living choice. The story of the gecko in the drain serves as a lesson for every crowded city in the world. We spend our lives trying to drown out the noise, trying to find a faster way to get where we're going. We treat the animals in our lives as accessories to our routines, forgetting that they are our oldest and most loyal protectors. The next time you're in a rush, and your dog stops to sniff a grate or stare at a wall, don't just pull the leash. Take a breath. Look at the ground. Listen to the frequency of the world around you. Your dog might be seeing something you're too busy to notice, and that stubborn moment might be the only thing keeping the ground from opening up beneath your feet. As the city lights flicker on and the crowds begin to surge once more, Copper sits on his porch, watching the tide of humanity. He knows that the city is a fragile thing, a beautiful machine that can break at any moment. But he also knows that as long as there are guardians like him, the pack will always have a chance to find the exit before the lights go out. The ground isn't always as solid as it looks. If Copper's stubbornness gave you chills, help us honor the dogs who see what we ignore. Smash that like button to salute Copper and the small heroes who hold back the world. Subscribe to Paws That Saved Lives, the home of the world's most thrilling and dramatic animal legends. Comment Copper below if you believe a dog's nose is the ultimate early warning system.